Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 16 Part 1 The Red Gate. What do you mean, the Red Gate? Yunho Beck, president of the White Tiger Guild, had rushed to the site as soon as he received the news. Kitchell, the man in charge of trainees, looked ashen. Sir, I need to see for myself. President Beck breezed past the employees in front of the gate, who were standing gravely, as if attending a funeral. It's really a red gate. His expression turned grim. What was a red gate? It was a dangerous connection to the other world, which hunters could escape only by either killing the boss or waiting for a dungeon break to occur. Once a hunter went inside, that was it. The Red Gate would block out all external forces. It would be impossible to enter or exit. The president touched the surface of the gate. It was, as he suspected, rock hard. This is not good. No matter what they did, they wouldn't be able to help the hunters on the inside. He barked at Kitchell. Wasn't this supposed to be a C-rank gate? It was, sir. Did you have the association confirm? Yes, but they insisted it was a C-rank gate. Those sons of bitches. Yunho spat out curses. A red gate could spawn only from higher-ranked dungeons. The portals linked their world to another, so considering how much mana would have been flowing from the gate, it was impossible for it to have been measured as merely a C-rank dungeon. This particular one was at least a B rank. Worst case scenario, it was an A rank or even higher. And yet, the association wouldn't admit they'd messed up? Kitchell asked. Sir, should we measure the gate again with our own manometer? President Beck shook his head. Red gates are sealed tight, so it'd be impossible to calibrate. There was no way to fine-tune the reading, so it was impossible to determine the actual rank of the problematic gate. Besides, there were more important things to worry about than the rank. How many of our members are inside? 12, sir. How many of them are high-rank hunters? The leader is Hunter Chulkim, a rank, and with him are 7 B-rank hunters, 1 A-rank, and 7 B-rank hunters. The new recruits, will they be okay? The president shook his head again. Consider them all dead. If they're lucky, 2 or 3 of the A and or B ranks might make it out alive. But only if they were lucky. The odds were not in their favor. The hunters who'd gone in could barely clear a B-rank dungeon of the lowest difficulty. Anything beyond that would be too much for them. Barring any miracles, those trainees had 0 chance of survival. Beck looked very worried. Kitchell eyed the president and carefully spoke. One more thing, sir. Another person went in with the new recruits. The president raised his head. What were the chances of it being a high-rank hunter who happened to be passing by and went in with them because he was curious about the training? Miracles could happen. This would truly be a miracle. His voice got louder. Who was it? It's the hunter I've been keeping an eye on lately, sir. The response came from somewhere behind them. Yunho and Kitchell turned around at the same time to see Sangin breathing heavily and sweating profusely. Apologies for my tardiness. There was a traffic jam. Sangin had arrived last, as he lived the farthest away. Sangin glanced at the red gate. It looked like the entrance to an iron fortress. He felt suffocated just staring at it. But if it's Jinwoo's son, Jinwoo might be the game changer, defying the dire predictions being made here the way he defied fate so many times before. That was Songmin's vague hope. Yunho urgently approached him. The hunter you've been personally monitoring, Managerin? That's right, sir. Ah, yes. Yunho recalled hearing about this. Thinking about it, he'd heard Managerin had been quite busy these days. He'd been aiming for a particular hunter. Managerin had a knack for discovering exceptional talent. Could that hunter be? There was a glimmer of hope. What's his rank? A or B? If he was an S-rank hunter, there was no way Yunho wouldn't already know about him. There were barely 10 S-rank hunters in all of Korea. But Sang-in shook his head. Oh my god. Beck's face began to relax. Then an S-rank hunter went in there? Sang-min replied calmly. No, sir. He's an E-rank. Beck looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Jin-woo was taken aback. Does this gate lead to the other world? This was his first time experiencing it for himself, but he'd read about other people's experiences online. They all described it as feeling like they were sucked into the gate. Jin-woo thought it was an apt way to put it. Once inside, he was surrounded by darkness, and it felt like he was sliding somewhere unknown. Huh? When he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the middle of a snow-covered forest. Where are we? This isn't the inside of the dungeon, is it? The gate is gone! The hunters couldn't hide their bewilderment as they looked around. While everyone else was dumbstruck, Jin-woo narrowed his eyes and scanned the area. I don't sense anything out of the ordinary. Thanks to his training from the system, he was able to keep calm despite being thrust into a strange environment. The first thing he noted were the trees. They were coniferous, rarely found in Korea, and grouped together tightly as they stretched up to the sky. He noted that the snow atop the trees could be dangerous if it fell, before looking back down and making eye contact with someone. It was Chol Kim, the A-rank hunter who, like Jin-woo, was also warily scanning the area. They sized each other up and eventually turned away. In the meantime, Songi had come over to Jin-woo and was tugging at his clothes. Something went wrong, right? She was frightened, and her attitude and fake confidence were nowhere to be found. Jin-woo suddenly reached for her face. This startled Songi. Tough. Jin-woo snatched an arrow out of the air, and it quivered as if angry that it had missed its target, which would have been right between Songi's eyes. Ah! Her face went pale as soon as she realized what had just happened. A scream erupted from elsewhere. Eek! Arg! Whump! A male hunter struck in the forehead by an arrow fell to the ground. Blood spilled over his eyes and out of his mouth. Some of the hunters began sobbing. The arrow had been shot simultaneously with the one aimed at Songi. Thanks to this, no one else had seen Jin-woo catch the arrow mid-flight. Over there! It's those bastards! One of the B-rank hunters motioned to the top of a tree quite a distance from where they were. Before he even pointed it out, Jin-woo's and Chul's eyes were already trained on the spot. Two people were standing there. Two people, or should I say two creatures. They had white hair and skin, with silver eyes. Their kind also had a unique feature, pointy ears. These magic beasts were well known for their beauty and rarity, as well as the fact that they could be encountered only in higher-level dungeons. Ice elves, otherwise known as ice slayers. People who had never run into them referred to them as ice elves, but anyone who had ever fought them called them ice slayers. The latter group often added that a pretty name like elf didn't suit the bastards. Jin-woo immediately understood why experienced hunters held so much contempt for ice slayers. They're smiling. The two creatures lowered their bows and smiled eerily at the hunters. They seemed like they were standing before a grand buffet, trying to decide what to eat first. And what was your decision? Jin-woo frowned in thought. One arrow had been aimed to the group's far left, and the other to the far right. That was not random. The hunter struck down by the arrow was a man in his 30s, who had awakened as AC rank not too long ago. Other than Songi, he was the weakest of the bunch. And the other arrow. it targeted Songyi. They had gone after the two weakest members. If it wasn't for the system, I'd be the one with an arrow in my head. Jinwoo was put off by the Ice Slayer's superficial moves. He lifted the arrow above his head so the Ice Slayers could see it and broke it in two. Crack! Viewing this as a challenge, the archer who had fired the arrow gestured that he would slit Jinwoo's throat. Ha! Jinwoo had to laugh, but his eyes were deadly serious. I'm going to kill you with my own hands. Jinwoo responded to the threat with an icy glare. Soon, the Ice Slayers disappeared down the tree. Yes, that was the welcoming party. Finally, Chul spoke up. Since he was the only A-rank hunter in the group, everyone looked at him as the de facto leader. He was the designated leader of this strike squad anyway. As some of you may have already figured out, we're inside a red gate. Chul didn't bother to mince his words, which came off a little arrogant. Of course, no one complained. That means we'll all die, or they'll come to help us once the gate expires, and there's a dungeon break. The group was despondent. The fact that they couldn't count on being rescued came as a big shock. Chul continued. If we stay here, we'll either freeze to death or get killed by those ice bastards. I'm going to clear this dungeon and get out, even if I have to do it myself. Will anyone join me? People tended to trust Chul because of his wide shoulders and strong gaze. The hunters exchanged looks before deciding to go with him. Let's stay together. I'm in. Let's get out of here alive. I'll help too. But Chul shoved the last hunter in the chest when he approached, saying he wanted to help. Oh! Chul had kept his strength in check, but strength as an A rank was just that high. The other hunter stumbled back, wincing at the pain. Not you. Huh? Or you, or you either. Chul was pointing to a few more people, including the man. Jinwoo and Songyi were among the ones he indicated. Jinwoo's eyebrow twitched. He had singled out 5 hunters in total. All were C rank or lower. Sorry, but I can't have you tagging along. What do you mean? Do you know anything about red gates? The other man shook his head. 1 hour outside the gate is a whole day in here. Worst case scenario, it'll be several months in here before a dungeon break or I defeat the boss. I don't need the excess baggage. We're just baggage to you? The hunters singled out by Chul were pissed, but they all went quiet when he glowered at them. He spoke as if he were doing them a favor. Don't get too upset. If you can stay alive until we kill the boss, then everyone gets to go home. But still, the rejected hunters turned desperately to the ones Chul was taking with him, but none of them did anything. They were too busy avoiding eye contact. That was when, excuse me, a female B-rank hunter on Chul's team raised her hand. When Chul looked at her, she pointed at Jinwoo. Can I switch to their side? Up to you. She walked over to Jinwoo without a moment's hesitation. Chul looked back and forth between her and Jinwoo and then sneered. Since we have a spot available, I'll take one more. Me! The male hunter who had been shoved by Chul quickly ran forward before changing his mind. That was a normal reaction Jinwoo could understand. This woman is weird. He looked over at her suspiciously. The female hunter met his gaze and whispered quietly to him. That Chul guy didn't even see those arrows coming. Even if a person was a high-rank hunter, it didn't mean all their stats were equally high. Even an A-rank hunter could have low agility. Since Jinwoo understood the concept of stats, her comment didn't strike him as anything strange. Yeah, so? She grinned from ear to ear. You're not E-rank, are you? Outside the red gate, President Beck's expression was dark. Even though Sangin had briefed him about Jinwoo, he still felt uneasy. This is only speculation? That's right, sir. Sangin had to admit it. Nothing had been definitively proven about Jinwoo. If the president personally met Hunter Sung, he'd understand. There was something about Jinwoo that was different. Sangin was frustrated by his inability to explain himself. Yunho turned back to the gate. Then we only have Chul to rely on. Just then, this shouldn't be a problem for Chul. One more person joined their group. All three turned toward the newcomer. It was Sun Chan-ju, the department manager of the first administration team. He spoke confidently. I've thoroughly trained Hunter Kim to be prepared for every possible contingency. Ordinarily, the second administration team was in charge of training new hunters, but the first administration team had jurisdiction over training awakened beings who were a rank or higher. Those selected for the elite strike squad took a different route. Sungchen's confidence allowed the president's features to smooth slightly. How are Chul's results? Excellent, sir. His combat abilities alone were as good as the current members of the elite strike squad. Really? Yunho finally had his smile back. Chul was an A-rank hunter, and the type of talent who stood out among his peers. Perhaps he could successfully lead the B-rank hunters and clear the dungeon. Casualties among the C-rank hunters were to be expected, but the survival of the high-rank hunters was more important to the White Tiger Guild. Fortunately, Chul seems to be among the best of the best. The flame of hope, once dead, now sparked again. After managing to reassure the president, Sunchan now raised an eyebrow at Sangmin. You were saying something about an E-rank hunter who has potentially reawakened. He scoffed at the idea. Our man Chul is much more reliable than some hunter we can't really count on. Sangin clenched his jaw at the condescension, but he didn't see a need to raise his voice or get angry. We'll see who's right in the end. All four men turned in unison toward the red gate, where their hunters were being held captive. The crimson color of the gate seemed even more ominous today. You're not E-rank, are you? It was a daring question. Jinwoo replied. Then let me also ask you something. Sure. He looked toward Chul, and the hunters gathered around him. They were discussing strategy before heading out. How are you rookies so calm, considering the situation? The first thing trainees are taught is to expect the unexpected in a dungeon. Anything could happen in a dungeon. Jinwoo knew this better than anyone here. We've all been trained well, especially that guy Chul. He was being groomed for the White Tiger's elite strike squad. Their training kept their fear in check. Jinwoo thought this was absolutely absurd and realized with a start that they were no different from Songyun. She claimed they were prepared, but were they really? They could brag about their training all they liked, but they had no idea how terrifying dungeons could actually be. Knowing something and experiencing something are two very different things. A dungeon could easily shake one's confidence, and all it would take was a small crack for everything to fall apart. It took time to build up a wall, but only seconds to break it down. Jinwoo could predict what was in store for Chul's team. They looked tough on the outside, but they were beginners nonetheless. You still haven't answered me. Excuse me? Jinwoo looked to the woman. I asked you a question about whether he was an E-rank. She was more tenacious than he thought. Why do I have to answer you? He was blunt, but in her mind, Hee-Jin Park considered it a victory. She'd been around the block enough times to know what his reaction meant. He was self-assured. I knew I wasn't seeing things. And there was another reason she was sure about him. While training with the White Tiger Guild, she had witnessed how a lot of high-rank hunters moved. But Jin was hand earlier. She had never seen anyone move as fast as he did. I was barely able to make out what happened with my own eyes. She was an athlete who had awakened as a combat hunter, so she was confident with what she could do physically. Heejin's eyes sparkled. This man is at least a rank. No, maybe even. She asked again to try and extract the answer she wanted. Come on! Can't you please just tell me? It's none of your business. That was enough small talk. Jinwoo turned away. He was done with the third degree, and anyway, Chul was approaching them. Chul and Jinwoo looked each other over. We're going. Chul's voice was very deep and gravelly, so he sounded threatening no matter what his intentions were. Down that path. He wasn't simply reporting his team's itinerary. His expression made it clear he was asking Jinwoo what his plan was, as well as issuing a veiled threat to not follow them. Jinwoo had a look around before turning back to him. We'll be going toward the forest. Good luck. Chul's team was the one that would need luck, but Jinwoo kept his thoughts to himself. You too. Jinwoo's team started heading into the forest. As soon as they were out of his line of sight, Chul burst out laughing. Morons! Pardon? Look over there. Chul uncrossed his arms and gestured at the trees. Everywhere he pointed, there were claw marks on the trunks, clearly made by some large animal. Those are bears! Ice bears! Among animal-type magic beasts, bear-like magic beasts were especially dangerous. Those claw marks were their way of marking their territory. The hunters on Chul's team shook their heads. Tisk tisk. They would have been better off waiting for us here. The E-rank hunter just led innocent people to their deaths. Is he even properly trained? Chul laughed derisively in the direction of the woods. What do you expect from an E-rank hunter? Wait a minute. His grin was suddenly wiped away. Most of that group were C-rank, and there was one B-rank hunter with them. So why did Chul assume that Jinwoo was the leader? He hadn't considered anything wrong or even odd about that until now. He shrugged it off. So what? Jinwoo was a dead man walking anyway. He should be thinking about his own neck instead of those weaklings with no chance of survival. It was unfortunate that anyone had to die, but shouldn't the living keep on living? Chul roared at his group. Let's move! Jinwoo led the way, but Heejin soon moved to block his path. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Jinwoo crossed his arms, his expression making it clear he wasn't impressed. It was a warning to choose her next words wisely. She quieted down as if she'd gotten the message. I'm sorry, but I really need to say this. Heejin pointed at one of the nearby trees. Do you see that? There were huge claw marks gouged into a tree trunk. And there! And over there, too. It was difficult to find a tree without any claw marks or significant damage. Those are all signs of bears marking this whole place as their territory. This forest is filled with bear-type magic beasts. Dogs and monkeys are weaker than tigers or lions. Magic beasts work the same way. Tiger or lion-type magic beasts were more powerful than dog or monkey-type magic beasts. So what about bears? Bears, especially polar bears, were among the strongest carnivorous animals around. Jinwoo's team had walked right into the territory of magic beasts reminiscent of that terrifying animal. No wonder she was so heated. We need to turn back right now, before the magic beasts come after us. TSK. Jinwoo clicked his tongue. What? Heejin had expected Jinwoo to react either by getting mad, being shocked, or accepting the facts. All her guesses were wrong, though. She was giving him solid advice, yet he regarded her as if she were an idiot. Why? Why is he looking at me like that? Heejin's face turned red from embarrassment. WH what? Her voice had risen again. Ji-woo sighed before explaining. It's hard to find an unmarked tree, which means there's more than 1 or 2 ice bears here. That's why we need to go BA. That's why we're going into the forest. What? Hee-jin blinked, perplexed. She still doesn't get it. Ji-woo had no choice but to spell it out. While we're making our way through the woods, all we have to worry about are ice bears. Oh! She finally understood what he was trying to say. The presence of so many ice bears meant that there were no predators stronger than them in this forest, which in turn meant they didn't have to worry about coming across more powerful magic beasts. Why didn't I think of that? She felt embarrassed about her outburst. Her face and neck flushed, and she hung her head low. Ji-woo kept his disapproval to himself. The unknown is what makes dungeons so frightening. No one could prepare for an unknown enemy, after all. But here, their opponents were clear. Bear-type magic beasts. He didn't know how strong ice bears were, but they were definitely weaker than those elves they'd encountered. The elves wore clothes made of bearskin. That's why he had chosen the forest. Ji-woo planned to level up in the forest, keeping an eye on Chul's team as well as the Ice Slayers, while waiting for the right time to make a move. This was the safest course of action. Something caught his eye. Why is your face so red? Hee-jin's face was abnormally beet-colored. She could barely raise her head to speak in a tiny voice. Be because I'm cold. Huh? Ji-woo gave a long sigh before calling up the shop and picking out thick fur jackets and winter shoes from the list of items for purchase. Ping. Item: warm fur jacket. Acquisition difficulty: none. Category: miscellaneous. Provides warmth to the body when worn. Price: 10 gold. Item: warm boots. Acquisition difficulty: none. Category: miscellaneous. Provides warmth to the feet when worn. Price: 10 gold. A fur jacket and a pair of boots only cost 10 gold each. Unlike items with buffs and debuffs, miscellaneous items were inexpensive. Compared to how much gold he had, they were dirt cheap. Balance: 431,930 gold. Though I can't believe I have to spend my gold on these kinds of things. Ji-woo bought the items. Since he couldn't discriminate, he bought enough for all 5 members of the party and spent 100 gold. 5 coats and 5 pairs of boots appeared at Jinwoo's feet. Everyone besides him looked like their eyes would pop out of their heads. Whoa! What? Spatial magic? Even Hee-jin was so surprised, she managed to raise her head. Ji-woo said coolly, Please help yourselves. As he reached for the closest fur jacket, Sung-hee suddenly grabbed his sleeve. Their eyes met, and eventually, Sung-hee was able to get out the words. What exactly are you, mister? You caught an arrow earlier, and now you use some kind of strange magic to get these clothes. Jinwoo made a face. It was obvious they'd start asking questions relentlessly, and things would get troublesome if they continued like this. Okay, this is where I need to draw a line. He spoke firmly. I brought you here, so I promise to take responsibility and protect you, but... He lowered his voice. Do not ask me any questions. He looked at Hee-jin and the other hunters in turn. This goes for all of you. No questions, no demands. And finally, if you don't like it, you can leave. I won't stop you. The other 2 male hunters, who had initially followed willingly because of the B rank Hee-jin, looked back and forth between Jinwoo and the fur jackets they were about to put on before shaking their heads hard. There was one more reason why Jinwoo had chosen the forest. Stats. Name: Jinwoo Sung. Class: Shadow Monarch. Level: 51. Title: the one who overcame adversity, and one other. Careful not to alert the others in any way, Jin-woo called up the stat window and changed his title from the one who overcame adversity to Wolf Assassin. Title: Wolf Assassin and one other. A title given to those skilled at hunting wolves. When battling an animal-type monster, all abilities will increase by 40%. The buff was perfect for his current situation, so why not take advantage of it? Ping. An animal-type monster has appeared. The title buff has been applied. Jin-woo grinned at the confirmation message. Perfect. That was when the other hunters started screaming. It's a bear! Ice bear! An ice bear had picked up their scent and was now lumbering toward them. Strangers had invaded its territory, and the ice bear did not look kindly on intruders. Growling, it bared its translucent, ice-like teeth and slowly rose up on its hind legs. Its enormous body was all the hunters could see. It resembled a polar bear, but was twice as big, and embedded in the middle of its chest was an essence stone, like an emblem signaling that it was a magic beast. Grara! Its loud roar shook the entire area, and everyone except Jin-woo froze in terror. Jin scowled. How is only having to worry about ice bears a good thing? How could anyone say that after seeing this creature? She'd almost fallen for Jin-woo's BS. But as soon as she caught sight of the magic beast, she was certain she'd been right all along. We shouldn't have come into the forest. Sensing the impending danger, Jin got in front of the group and yelled at them. I'm going to draw its attention, so you guys, act. Someone forcefully tugged at Heejin's clothes, and she had to stagger backward to stay on her feet. By the time she regained her balance, Jin-woo was standing in front of her. What are you doing? Jin-woo stabbed his finger at her. Listen to me loud and clear. I'll deal with the magic beasts. He didn't want to lose out on any experience points. These teddy bears were going to help him level up before he had to deal with the real enemies, the Ice Slayers. What? Jin couldn't hide her exasperation. He pulled me back just so he could kill the magic beasts by himself? The two mage hunters also stopped casting, completely dumbfounded. I don't care how strong you think you are. That is a magic beast in a high-ranked dungeon. Ignoring Heejin's irate voice coming from behind him, Ji-woo walked toward the bear. If I use a dagger, it would get too messy with blood spraying all over the place. He'd pulled his daggers out of reflex, but he put them back into his inventory. He clenched his fists instead. I was only supposed to observe, but I'm sure they'll understand. Since this is an emergency situation, Ji-woo locked eyes with the ice bear. Groar! Despite being as thick as a telephone pole, the ice bear's foreleg was lightning quick. Shwick! But all it struck was air. It's huge but also fast. Jin-woo understood why these creatures were infamous as he leaped above it. Still, all his leveling up had not been in vain. Before the bear could raise its head, Jin-woo struck down on its forehead with all his might. Wham! The bear's head slammed into the ground. With its skull smashed in, and its long tongue trailing out the side of its mouth, it lay there lifeless. You have leveled up. There it was. Jin-woo had expected to level up this time around, so it was a good thing he'd stopped Heejin. WH, what in the world are you? Jin-woo turned around at that shaky voice and took in the faces of the four speechless hunters. Jin-woo exhaled. I told them no questions in advance exactly because I wanted to avoid this. But temporary memory loss during a shocking experience was to be expected. Ji-woo had no choice but to repeat himself forcefully. I said no questions. If you don't like my way, the exit, Ji-woo pointed in the direction Chul's team had gone, is back there. Jean had gotten herself together in the meantime. I just saw how you killed that bear. Do you really think I'd leave you now? She was overwhelmed. She'd gone with her gut in choosing Jinwoo over Chul, thinking he was the better choice. But only now did she realize she'd hit the nail on the head. Jean had a good sense for self-preservation, so her decision had come quickly. She knew the smartest thing to do would be to follow Jinwoo if she wanted to get out of there alive. Just in case he was thinking of abandoning them, she frantically said, "Please be our party leader, Jinwoo. We'll do whatever you say." I did say no demands, but he thought about it for a second, then readily agreed. Thinking ahead, he realized this might be a convenient arrangement. Jean looked back at the others. Since Songi had arrived with Jinwoo, Jean didn't need to ask her opinion on the matter, but that left two people. "You're good with this, right?" With all eyes on them, the two hunters glanced between the ice bear's carcass and Jinwoo, then nodded vigorously.